Well, my reaction was I have never seen anything like this before. This is very odd. And obviously, being a worker, you're thinking, is it real or is it not real? Because everything, even today, you're looking at injuries and all this stuff going, is it real? Is it work? The Seth Rollins thing was the one that kind of tripped everybody up recently with the leg injury and then coming out and cashing in. So we've been predisposed to not believe anything that we see or anything that we hear. And with this, you're kind of wondering, but with Bret going to WCW and this being done, spitting on Vince, wrecking the entire outside the ring commentary area and everything, and then doing WCW, which back then, WWE never mentioned, or WWF at the time, never mentioned WCW, even though there was a Monday Night War. They sort of did the Billionaire Ted stuff. They parried it, but they never gave it any kind of credence, which even then, during that part of the Attitude Era, it was like, oh my God, you said WCW, you said Nitro, or even when Nitro went out and out to give you the finishes of every tape show, that was taboo. That was really exciting and a little bit like, ooh, this is, how's this going to play out? But this was the ultimate, what's going to happen next? Like it was, the boys were watching this stuff more than the fans in a way. Like what's going to happen next? Are people going to quit, give their notice, not want to work for Vince? Are they never going to trust? I mean, you should never trust a wrestling promoter. Are they ever going to trust Vince when he says, yes, you go out there, here's the finish? I'm sure there was a time where people were like, is he going to screw me next?
Right. Let's go to the Montreal thing. So we've got your opinion on what happened. You didn't know if it was real or anything. Did you ever call up the 1-900 lines to see what they were saying? Did you ever do that?
I was broke. I couldn't even afford to get a can of tuna at that point. I'm not, call the hotline. To us, as workers, that was still like a meme before it was a meme. You know, when people said, you know, when somebody was trying to be a smart, hey, what are you, a smart ass? And it was like, hey, what's the finish? Call the hotline.
What did Raven and anybody else you were hanging about with at the time think?
No, this is a strange time because my communication with Raven or anybody from the flock, we're talking about November, and I was just about out, and it was the beginning of December where I announced my, quote, retirement from the business in early December. So I was kind of in the desert in a way, and obviously was not communicating with Raven because it really wasn't worth talking to him about anything at that point. So I was kind of on an island all on my own out in the desert, as I just said, but watching it as myself as a worker and saying, oh my God, this is like, it felt like kind of like the end of the wrestling world in a way, but it was actually the beginning of something crazy and exciting and ultra, ultra profitable. So who would have known? But it almost didn't turn out that way.
Well, that's exactly where, because you told me beforehand, it's like, well, the Montreal thing didn't have to happen at all. And you're right, it didn't have to happen for a multitude of reasons like that. And we can back and forth. I wrote a lot about it in my own heart book, so I've got some of the facts still in my head, or best I know facts anyway. But why did you say, because you saved it for now, so I don't know what you're going to say, why do you say that the Montreal Screwjob nearly didn't happen?
No, I'm saying the Attitude Era nearly never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Montreal Screwjob, I don't know how you could have avoided it in a way. I know how you could have avoided it. You just get Bret to put, like Cornette was part of that whole thing, and he tells it a lot more entertainingly than I could ever. But he was talking about, he supposedly came up with, well, why don't you just screw him? Or, you know, why don't you double cross him? And then Vince was like, whoa. And then other people are saying they came up with the Montreal Screwjob or double crossing Bret. But it's definitely something that should have been handled a lot earlier. And here's how you avoid the Montreal Screwjob. The only way, but maybe not the way you could financially. You keep Bret and you honor the contract. That's the only way to avoid it, correct? Because this was the 20-year deal at whatever amount of money that Bret agreed to, Vince agreed to, and then Vince turned around and said, I can't afford it, and let him negotiate with WCW. Do I have that off base?
Here's the thing, is that I think people get wrong about Montreal, is that wasn't Bret's last night. That was far from Bret's last night. I mean, he didn't even debut in WCW until like late December. So he had some weeks left in his contract. And Eric at least claimed at the time he was amenable enough to let Bret work with the WWF through to January of 1998. So there were so many ways that the belt could have been taken off Bret. And I understand his issues with Shawn. You know, it's a campaign of a year and a half practically of he thinks that Shawn's against him, and he said things to his face where he basically disrespected him to his face kind of thing, and then Bret
He'd never put him over. That's what Shawn said.
Brett says...
Well, it was after Bret said he would put him over, right?
Yeah. So once again, Bret's always right, but I completely understand Bret's point of view. It's like, well, I'm not going to make this dude who apparently, one, has a problem with me, and two, has no respect for the business or anything else kind of thing. Or, you know, Bret's position in the business. But there were so many people he could have dropped the title to. He said he'd drop it before Survivor Series. He said he would drop it afterwards. But what people forget is that, you know what, the first WWF... I don't know if it was the first title defense Shawn ever did, but it might as well have been. It was against the Brooklyn Brawler at Madison Square Garden in an untelevised match. Because the month before, there was a number one contenders battle royal in Madison Square Garden. And Pat Patterson, of all people, would you believe, thought, wouldn't it be funny if a true outsider won it? And Steve Lombardi ended up winning it. And then they completely forgot about that, and they were like, oh no, now we've got to do this match because he won the battle royal. So it ended up being Shawn and Brooklyn Brawler. It wasn't the main event, but it was in the middle of the card kind of thing. And they had a really good, a pretty good match, I believe, if nothing else. I've not heard. I've not seen it myself personally.
Yeah, but you know what's funny about that? You don't want to pull a rib at the mecca of WWE. The Garden back then, you do not play games or say, wouldn't it be, it'd be funny. It's like that version of, it would be cool. It'd be funny if this guy won. Nobody will remember. Yeah. No, at the Garden, you don't want to mess with that crowd. They will remember. And if you want to, even if it's the Brooklyn Brawler, so it's kind of like they're going to cheer him on because he's in their area, their neighborhood. But I was going to get back to this. With Bret saying he would do all that and Bischoff saying he would do business in a way to let Bret drop the title, if they even extended it somewhere into mid or the third week of January, where usually the Royal Rumble happened, could you imagine if it was like, this is the first Royal Rumble where the champion will defend the title in the Rumble? Bret could get eliminated early and screwed in a way, but then you have a brand new WWF champion, but Bret never got pinned for the title. That's kind of a way where everybody could be happy if you just waited it out. But then again, dude, we wouldn't have gotten it. WWF would still be in financial trouble, and there would be no Mr. McMahon. Let's get to that, because that might have never happened. That's what I'm saying. There wouldn't have been all these stars that would have come out from the Attitude Era. That's my belief.
And absolutely right, I think you are as well. To that end, okay, I think Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon would have still happened in a way, because I think their first interaction, I can't remember if it was just before or just after, but they have like a brief interaction, and then they just drop it for months on end.
Well, plus Austin stunned McMahon in the Garden when he won.
Yeah.
He literally was stunned.
You've got to admit. I mean, it's the way he takes
not.
it.
What are you kidding me?
Love it.
That big goof can't sell to save his life. Come on. This is the best sell Vince McMahon ever did. In this, when Flair would say, we're partners.
Oh, it does. That is amazing.
But I gotta explain why it almost never happened. All the stuff you're talking about could have never happened, because after Bret, we're gonna get back to the events in there. Maybe Bret knocked Vince out, gave him a black eye. Vince came on to whatever the old primetime set it looked like, where JR interviewed him, but it was more muted, where they were kind of 45
like
degrees from each other
on that as well. Like he had really weird makeup.
That's where Vince did the Bret screwed Bret, right? Mm-hmm. So after that, this is from Vince Russo, after that, and he did that, he really believed in it. He thought the fans would be on Vince McMahon's side as a babyface, and Bret would be the heel. The time-honored tradition, passing the torch, whatever the cliches and catchphrases are. After that, Vince Russo was right there. Everybody was telling him, this is great. We should play, because Vince wanted to just forget about it and move on. And everybody on the inner circle, all the yes-men, all the ass-kissers said, yes, we need to just sweep it under the rug, forget it, move on. You're still a babyface. You're the babyface in this. And Russo's like, are you crazy? You can be the biggest heel. I'm paraphrasing. We need to lean into this. Lean into the whole thing that you're the boss that screwed Bret, all that stuff, and finally convince Vince to basically not what we saw, but the birth of Mr. McMahon. So basically telling Mr. McMahon's truth, and here we go. Without that little pivot, if they swept it under the rug, I can sure as heck guarantee you that there wouldn't be a Mr. McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Even with because Austin was stunning everybody, but he didn't have the ultimate arch rival and villain. What everybody who has a 9-to-5 job, everybody who works, we even have it with YouTube and sponsors, you have to have a villain, and usually the villain is your boss, the person you work for. Almost nobody likes their boss. As a matter of fact, mostly everybody, especially now, hates corporate America, hates their boss. There should be TKO could be the new Mr. McMahon in 2025. Mm-hmm. Everybody hates TKO. Can you imagine if they brought Vince back and said, this is TKO's pick to run WWE? That's the only thing that will save Triple H. Triple H versus Vince would make Triple H a babyface once again.
Mm. Well, I don't know. Maybe more 8-minute introductory packages he voices over could do it.
Enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show.
But I'm telling you right now, dude, that saved the company. And you could say anything you want about Russo, but how should I say, devil on the shoulder when everybody else is telling Vince, you're the amazing, you're great, don't, Bret's an asshole, whatever. That's what saved the company.
I think sort of like the theme of what we're saying is like, could this be prevented? Yeah, of course it could. There's a couple more things I want to make mention of. One, Vince McMahon, according to Bret anyway, was constantly taking Shawn's side, regardless of who was at fault, because obviously he's not in the room, but he's always taking Shawn's side. So therefore that's, sowing more seeds of resentment in Bret, of course. But the other one is I believe this might have been earlier in the day in Montreal, or maybe a week before or days before, I don't know. But Vince is laying out scenarios where Bret can finally lose to Shawn or whatever it might be, and I think it culminates in like a 4-way match where he's lost every match up until that 4-way. And then I think he loses again. And he says, and then like the idea was maybe go on Raw the next night and say, if I don't win this match, then I'll retire or whatever it will. And then he finally wins. But it's like, why would you trust Vince on the way out, especially in 97? Why would you trust Vince, who's telling you are going to lose every single match on your way out until the last one? Kind of thing.
That's a good point.
Why would you ever trust? Yeah. And Bret turned him down straight away. He's already
told you exactly who he is right then and there, right?
Yeah.
During the course of the week. But what's Vince supposed to do? You should put people on the way out. Vince, you put the belt on Bret. So Vince booked himself into this mess as well.
And it's the Jeff Jarrett thing. We were just saying with Jeff Jarrett before, he turned up and with the China thing. Why did you let his contract run out while he was still champion? And
this company let The Rock's contract run out too.
Yeah, that might have different reasons, though. That might have been on purpose.
What I'm saying is they let people's contracts run out, or Vince made a deal that at the time seemed to be the 20-year, multi-million-dollar deal seemed so preposterous in a way. But in another way, when you're looking as time went on, it was a pretty company-friendly contract over time. And how much more, and I'm sure Bret thinks about this more than we're about to say, how much longer, for some reason, WCW was cursed when WWE people went over there at this particular point. How much more, and how many more classics, and how many more moments would we have gotten from Bret Hart selfishly as fans if he never went to WCW? Think about that.
I think that is lost in time to a point, is that Bret didn't want to go. He would have rather have made $10.5 million over 20 years with the WWF for more dates. And keep in mind, it's front-loaded. So it would have been like, I think it's like 1.25 maybe for the first couple of years as an active wrestler. And then he retires or goes part-time in a couple of years, and then he makes $500,000 a year, whatever it is. But the thing is that he wanted to make less than half the money in the first 3 years compared to WCW for more dates. He would rather, and I think it's fair to say for Bret, he is, and I'll say this in the best possible way for Bret, because he took himself seriously. More people should take himself seriously like Bret did. But he was a mark for himself. But he knew that WCW was not the place he should be. That was proved over time. Proved very quickly, in fact. He wanted to be with the WWF. He wanted to work for Vince McMahon. He wanted to be the company guy. And here's the other thing that gets me. Vince says, we can't afford your contract. And then they're taking the water coolers out the office, is the saying. They were looking at downgrading into being a regional company, supposedly, around this time. Then weirdly, at SummerSlam 97, they're threatening to give away $1 million in a fan giveaway, but they didn't actually give away that money anyway. But the crazy thing is that why couldn't they afford Bret's contract? I bet he could have done the entire time, because especially by the beginning of 98, the business and ticket sales were already way up. They could have completely afforded his contract. So that's why I think the conspiracy comes in, is that Vince, maybe with Sean's say-so or trying to get into his ear or whatever, Vince really did want to get rid of Bret.
That's an interesting, and actually that's a possible theory. You know why? It seems like he's running the same playbook that he ran with Savage.
And Hogan. Both.
And Hogan.
Yeah, they get into their late 30s and yeah.
Yeah, Bret became not part of the new generation anymore, right? And we're trying to get a youth movement, a younger generation. And that's when Savage said, we'll get a second opinion. That was a great line. I want to say this. If Bret did stay, think about it. You just said ticket sales, even if they kept the current contract, on stock options alone when they went public, Bret could have cashed in off of that. Not right away, but he would have got a ton of stock options.
Bradshaw did. Did you know that?
Yeah.
He sold the first day when he got all the stock.
Oh, really? But imagine if Bret held on to it till now when TKO took it over, and you're, what are you, around $200 a share right now?
Yeah, I think at the time, like the shares were like $15, and then they sunk to under 10 for like over a decade. And they only started coming up around when the WWE Network, 2014. Then they went up to like $30 a share, and then the next huge jump was when the WWE SmackDown on Fox deal was made in 2019, I believe. I don't know if it was announced in 2018, but that's when the stock,
like November 1st or something, 2019, something like that.
Yeah, that's when the stock jumped like massively for the second time.
Yeah, but think about that too. Then you got Bret as part of the company and maybe a legend, maybe an agent, maybe office management. Then TKO takes over. Or you got all these billion-dollar TV deals where there's more money, and Bret could probably turn around and maybe get some kind of... He would have made many more millions of dollars than the $3 million per year or whatever he got at WCW for the short time. He would have... And I'm sure he's getting paid from WWE right now. I'm sure he's made appearances. Throughout the years, he made the money back. But you can imagine when he stayed there, he didn't tarnish, in his mind, his legacy at all. But going to WCW, and then the IPO, then the TV licensing deals, then TKO buys WWE. Even the Saudi Arabia money, in a way, not that he would wrestle, but maybe if Goldberg never kicked him and he never got a stroke, he might have had a match and got millions of dollars for one match.
Maybe.
I mean, we're talking like this is what if, this is all in theory, but maybe the going to WCW potentially derailed, the way it looks, his career and ended it way, way, way too early.
Yeah, the reason why I mentioned the Vince thing is because, well, could the Montreal Screwjob have been avoided? And I think all the reasons for somebody who was sane yes, of course, it could have been avoided 100 times over. I think at some point Vince decided that he was sick of Bret, or his salary was upsetting the apple cart because Shawn and Undertaker were making Sting money at the time, and Bret was making something like 1.25, I guess.
What's Sting money? I don't know what Sting money is.
I think it's 700 or 750.
Oh, 750 was what Shawn was making.
Yeah. So that'll be Sting money, I think. I can't remember if it's 700 or 750 at the moment. But there's one more thing I wanted to ask you. Have we ever come up with a definitive list of who knew about the Montreal Screwjob? Because I wanted to throw this out at you, wherever the list is. Vince, yes. Shawn, yes. Triple H, undoubtedly so, we think. And if Triple H knew, China probably knew. So we'll say that. Jerry Briscoe knew, because he was teaching Shawn defensive whatever it was.
I remember he's trying to teach him how to shoot and everything.
Yeah. Earl Hebner did, of course. Vince Russo said he didn't know. Jim Cornette said he didn't know, but they both may have... Russo's claimed that he may have suggested it. Jim Cornette, very in-depth, has said he suggested this kind of thing, but didn't realise they were actually going to implement it. Bruce Pritchard has said he absolutely didn't know. Pat Patterson said he absolutely didn't know. Which rises to the weird theory here. Who played the music? Which makes me think one of two things. One, Bruce Pritchard did know, because I believe, wasn't he the guy who made the call to play the music at the time?
I'm not sure, but Bruce was right there in Gorilla all the time and would give cues to the referee, and my assumption is also music.
So it's possible Kevin Dunn knew, it's possible Kevin Silfies or whoever was directing in the truck knew as well, or were told that this music needs to play. Someone sorted out the queuing up of music. The only one that I'm not absolutely sure on at all, and I'd love to ask him, is Sergeant Slaughter, because he was out there with Vince on the floor.
What I would say is, I can see what Vince is saying. You got to give him some credit, because he acted like I and only I alone, or the core people that are involved with this, need to know. And it would hurt everybody. Not that the agents or management at a pro wrestling company have much credibility with the wrestlers, because they lie on behalf of the owner and the promoter. But my thought would be that Vince would keep it as close to his vest as possible, so everybody else has culpable deniability with this, or plausible deniability. That's my thought. But if there was one person, if Jerry Briscoe knew, Pat Patterson had to know. If Pat Patterson knew, even separate with that, just based on the responsibilities and duties of this person, like you said, music, cues, all that stuff, Bruce Pritchard had to know. Kevin Dunn, maybe. Kerwin, maybe. You know why? If Bruce is screaming, if they see the finish and Bruce is screaming, hit Shawn's music, they're going to hit the music. It's just a chain of command thing. They see the finish, they might go, what is going on? But Bruce is like, just hit the music. They're going to hit the music. And if Bruce says, keep rolling, because remember Vince said, I want you to get all this, so when Bret's wrecking all the equipment and everything, remember they said, we want you to keep shooting this. That's a Vince call to Bruce, to Kerwin, to Kevin Dunn, which means none of them at that particular point needs to be clued in. Bruce, I think, is already clued in. But the directors and the camera operators are literally with blinders on, just listening, just following orders. That's all they're doing. So I believe some or most of that, but I have a problem believing that Bruce didn't know it all.
What about Jim Ross?
I would say with his interactions with Vince and everything, and the fact that they want the commentators to just react to what's going on, JR didn't know. They do that. They do that on the most benign things. You notice that? Like, nobody knows Brock's coming back. Nobody knows this guy's coming back. Nobody knew Punk was coming back. They want a real, I mean, for all we said, I mean, JR could have been like, man, they screwed him. That would have just led to more of the storyline afterwards. It would have helped, not hurt anything. Well, what do you think? Do you think JR knew?
That's a tough one. I'd need to re-listen to the commentary again. That's a tough one. Probably.
I lean towards no.
Because the thing is I hate to say this, but I figured Jim was pretty much a yes man as well at the time. So maybe he'd keep his mouth shut and just let it play out. I think his commentary was fairly professional, which it always was.
Well, you think by being that professional and not emotional that he was clued into it?
I don't
Do you
know.
think that hints at it?
I don't know.
I'm leaning towards no because of his, even though he runs talent relations, he knows his contract's been rescinded. Bret's going to WCW. We got a problem here with Bret not wanting to drop it to Shawn, and that's where JR, even though they're calling Vince, JR's put in the middle as the bad guy, as the bad cop with this. But from a commentator's perspective, they do not need to be clued in the finishes, surprises, and this was a surprise, trust me. So Bret was surprised more than anybody, which let's just touch on it real quick. There's that theory out there that Bret did know about this, that this is, I think it was it Warrior and maybe even Kevin Nash in the past have commented, Warrior's like, the camera's in the right place. They're shooting a documentary of Wrestling with Shadows, which, by the way, we should do an episode on that. All episode on that. Everything seemed to be in the right place. I'm just giving all the theories out here. And I love a good theory.
I know you love a good theory. I think, okay, here's the biggest one to counteract that, is that I can't really see Bret Hart being the world's greatest actor for nearly 30 years and being legitimately upset in lawsuits and
like we think he and Goldberg
else.
are best friends laughing and trolling everybody.
Yeah, no, not a chance.
This is the fringe point, like 1% type of thing. But, that's the thing too. There's cameras everywhere. So you're always going to get the action in WWE. They are good at capturing all that. But man, I don't think Vince even knew that possibly the thing that could have destroyed the company was actually the launching pad to make them more profitable than ever.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a few instances where things have gone absolutely not according to plan and it's worked out far better than anybody could have ever hoped for, or anybody could have scripted it to turn out that great. And then Vince resisted the Mr. McMahon thing. It's like, nah, not a chance, man.
There's a thing that Ben always says from the world of improv. If it feels weird, do it more. Obviously, Vince felt weird being the bad guy, and he wanted to always be the torchbearer for WWE and the flag bearer and all that stuff and the cheerleader for WWE. But man, if we never got Mr. McMahon, I don't know if WWE would even be here today.